Would be my pleasure. Hi, everyone. I've had the pleasure of meeting some of you already, but for those who I haven't met, my name is Mr. Becker. I am your school adjustment counselor. My guess is that's probably a very confusing title to many of you. For all intents and purposes, all you need to know is that I'm an additional support for each one of you, both for right now in seventh grade, straight until when you graduate Medfield High School many, many years from now. So please remember my name, remember my face. Should something come up following this presentation today, Mr. Marangi is here for you. I'm here for you. And at any point, should you need anything, do not hesitate to reach out to ask. So obviously, as we see here, we have Kelsey from Samaritans, which is the Massachusetts Suicide Prevention Organization, here to talk to us about some very, very important information. Because this is such a serious topic and oftentimes a challenging topic for a lot of people to discuss, I just want to ask all of you to sort of remain respectful, pay attention as best you can, and try to listen to a lot of the things that we really think it's important for you all to hear. Once again, though, because this can be such a challenging topic, and I know we'll reiterate this as well, if at any point, if you guys feel uncomfortable, if you need to take a walk, if you need water, if you need to go down to guidance to see Mr. Marangi, myself, anybody down there, please do not hesitate to do so. We understand this can be really challenging, so please don't feel as if you have to sit in that uncomfortability, but if you are here, please pay attention as best you can and be respectful for the information. Not that you need to know this, but just so you're aware, this is probably the first time that many of you are hearing about this topic. This might be the first time that you're hearing about some of this information. It will not be the last. As a guidance department, you'll be hearing some more information your freshman year and senior year surrounding this topic and about some of the things that, again, we think are very important for you to know. Following this as well, you guys will be filling out a very short survey that just kind of allows us to take the temperature about how you're doing, and it will give you the opportunity to have further conversations again with myself, with a guidance counselor, if you feel that you need anything today or moving forward. So without further ado, Kelsey, please take us away.
Great, thank you for that introduction. And thank you everyone for being here today. So again, my name is Kelsey. I'm here with an organization called Samaritans, and I'll tell you a little bit about us in just a moment here. But before we get to that, I just want us to gather everything that we're gonna need. So you're on your tablet. I need you to go to www.menti.com and enter the code at the top of the page. And then you're gonna need something to write with. So whether that's a piece of paper and a pencil, if you wanna write in your tablet, whatever works for me, whatever is easiest for you, that works. So I'll give it just a second here. I'll put the code in the, I can't access the chat for some reason, but the code is 2823574. And again, you're going to www.menti.com. So I'll give it just a few more seconds here for everyone to join. All right, so as we continue, that information should be at the top of your screen there. So if you're having trouble, if you X out, you can log right back on. But you should have a question that popped up on your screen. And it says, what word comes to mind when you think about mental health? So whatever first pops in your brain, feel free to share that. All right. So we've got some answers coming in. A lot of people said, maybe a certain diagnosis like anxiety, good, positive, right? Our mental health isn't always something that is negative. Our brain, stress. This is awesome. I think we're seeing a really good array here, and it's really nice for me to kind of get a temperature of the room, see where you're all at, get an idea of what you know already so I can meet you there. So thank you for sharing that quickly in the introduction here. So I just want to reiterate that suicide is a heavy topic. And, I don't know any of you personally. I don't know your personal history with suicide, if you've ever lost a loved one, if you've ever struggled with those thoughts yourself. So I just want to remind you all that if you need to take a break, it's already been said, but that's 100% okay. Feel free to take a step out in the hallway. A teacher might follow you, make sure you're okay, but I certainly won't be offended. This topic can bring up a lot of emotions for people. And keeping that in mind, I just ask once again that everyone be respectful of viewpoints. So everyone has a different experience with mental health, with suicide prevention. And if someone shares a story today and it doesn't line up with what you know, we want to make space for that and just be respectful. And also try to be mature and appropriate with the conversation as well. And of course, there are no bad questions. So feel free to ask them in the chat box. You can send them privately as well. I'll probably hold them until the end to answer that way just for time reasons, but I'm happy to scroll back through those and answer any and all questions you might have. So you have 1 minute, let's do 30 seconds actually. You have 30 seconds to write down the number on the screen here. So it says 877-870-4673. All right, so the same number is nice and real big on the screen here. And what that is the Samaritans helpline. So as I mentioned, I'm here with Samaritans today, and the main thing to know about us is that we aim to prevent suicide. And one of the main ways that we do that is we host this 24/7 helpline. So this is a number that you can call or text any hour of the day, any day of the week, including holidays. There's always someone there to talk with you. On an average year on that helpline, we get about 80,000 calls and texts. So if you do the math, that's about 200 on any given day. So I'm sure you can imagine if we're getting that many calls, we're getting that many texts, every day we're talking to people who have thoughts of suicide, which is absolutely true. But every day we're also talking to people who, aren't feeling suicidal, but they're fighting with their family a lot and they need kind of an unbiased listening ear. Or they're just really anxious. They don't know why, but they can't calm down. They just need someone to talk to. So I think that's something that a lot of people don't realize about our helpline is you don't have to have thoughts of suicide to call or text us. Of course, as I said, every day we're talking to people who do, but it's for anything that's hard, stressful, that you really just need a listening ear for. The other thing that I think young people specifically like to know is that our helpline is confidential and anonymous. So when you call this number or when you text this number, the person on the Samaritan's end will introduce themselves. They'll probably ask if you would like to introduce yourself, but it's not a requirement. A lot of times people tell us, I'm not very comfortable introducing myself. I'd rather stay anonymous, and that's fine with us. Whatever makes it easier to have that conversation, we're happy with that. And it is an absolutely free service, so there's no charge associated with using this helpline. If you have questions, again, put those in the chat box. If you have any specifically about the helpline, I'm happy to circle back at the end and answer that. But on your own tablet, you should see a true or false statement come up, and it says, true or false, talking about suicide will cause someone to consider suicide. All right, we've got some coming in. We're all over the board so far, but mostly kind of in that false and maybe undecided, not quite sure. Awesome. The correct answer there is false. So I think this is an understandable fear, right? Some of us said not so sure. Someone even said like maybe it's true. I think it's an understandable fear that we worry if we're supporting someone we love, what if we say something wrong? What if we make the situation worse? But what I can tell you as an adult in the suicide prevention field is that if someone's having thoughts of suicide and we ask them pretty directly, are you having thoughts of suicide? It's actually one of the most helpful things we can do for that person. Often when people are experiencing thoughts of suicide, they're also feeling like a burden. It can be really, really hard for them to even start the conversation that they need to have to get the support they need. So when we ask them directly as a friend in a compassionate and a caring way, really what we're doing is we're opening the door. And then all they have to take is one step forward towards that help. And if someone's not thinking about suicide, we can't really just place that thought magically in their head. So, I don't imagine that every single one of you will walk out of this presentation today and feel 100% comfortable to ask a friend that question. But I hope that you walk out knowing that it's okay to ask that question. And honestly, it can be one of the best things you can do for that person. I have one more, true or false. So true or false, it's a sign of weakness to have a mental health issue or think about suicide. All right, we've got the majority in the middle here, and absolutely it is false. So it's quite common throughout a life for someone to have some mental health issue, maybe think about suicide, but we all have mental health like we have physical health, right? There may be times where we're doing better. There may be times when we need that support. So it's absolutely not a sign of weakness. And actually, if someone's experiencing those mental health issues, if they're having thoughts of suicide, and they're able to reach out for the support they need, I always say that that's really a sign of strength. So jumping into a little bit the tools, into the content, my first question for all of you is, what are some examples of stressful things, difficulties, challenges that anyone your age might face? So you don't have to share yours personally. They can be more generic. And I see some already coming in. All right, so I'm seeing a lot of school, maybe homework, tests, adapting to remote learning, absolutely. Some peer pressure, sports, family, absolutely. I like how we kind of are all over here, right? Like there's some school, there's some social parts. And, you know, you may be looking at this screen here and seeing some of what your classmates answered, and you might be thinking, well, I get stressed about school. I've had issues with my friend, you know, I'm adapting to remote learning and I'm not having those thoughts of suicide. But having these challenges, or what we call risk factors, doesn't mean that someone automatically has those thoughts of suicide. But the more and more we have, the harder it can get to kind of hang on to them, to keep them managed. So it's a good reminder that if we feel like we're going through a lot of stressful things, let's reach out to someone in our life, make sure that we have that support. Or if we know a friend is going through a lot of those things, we know a friend is going through a really difficult time, make sure that we're checking in with them, asking how they're doing on a regular basis. The next thing we look out for is actual warning signs. So things that our friend is displaying, a change from their typical behavior that makes us think, I think my friend's struggling. I may be worried that they're thinking about suicide. So what are some examples of warning signs? So what are things that our friend can say, can do? How might they look that would indicate to us that they're struggling? So being distant, isolating themselves. Maybe they look sad, they've lost interest. Maybe some violence or self-harm, that's possible. Not talking as much, looking tired, not talking. Absolutely. Again, maybe they say, I want to die directly. That's definitely possible. Or, you know, sometimes people joke about suicide. And one of my big things that I always tell people is, I know it can be uncomfortable to take a joke seriously, a joke like that, but I would take it seriously. I would follow up with my friend and ask, are you really thinking about suicide? And, you know, maybe it's a minute, a few seconds, and it's a little uncomfortable. And they say, I was just joking. But personally, I'd rather have that peace of mind, right? Know if my friend is struggling and if that was their way of telling me. Because really, at the end of the day, all these warning signs, all these things that change in your friend, you know your friend best. You might notice these warning signs before any of the adults in their life do. So if you do notice these warning signs, if you notice a change in your friend, if you're starting to get worried, or honestly, if you just have a gut feeling, like I think they're going through something, I think they need some support, what we really want you to do is reach out to a trusted adult. And we'll talk about that a little bit in a bit. But what I want to do before we really dig into the tools that you can use to support a friend and yourself is take a little bit of time for all of you to do your self-care plan. So what I want you to do is write down 2 activities you enjoy, 2 things that help you relieve stress, and 2 trusted adults you could turn to in a time of need. So I'll give you about a minute here and I'll stay quiet while you do that. All right. If you need to keep writing, of course, feel free to do that as we talk here, but I would love to hear some examples. So if you're open to sharing, what is one activity or stress reliever that has been helping you cope better during the pandemic? All right, video games. I've heard that one quite a lot lately. Drawing, we've got dancing, basketball. Awesome. YouTube, time with family, watching comedy. Again, a nice range. So for some people, it's sports. For others, maybe it's something more laid back, like drawing, reading. Absolutely. So, some of the examples on the screen here, you might think that would never work for me. And that's okay. We want to really find out what works for us specifically, which is why I have you do that self-care plan. Because really, every single one of us has stressors in our life. Every single one of us sometimes has those challenges, those difficulties. And one of the best ways that we can kind of manage them and stay on top of all of it is do something that we enjoy or do something that relieves our stress. So, I imagine that you're all busy, right? You have school, homework. It can be hard sometimes to even find the time to do something we enjoy, to do our self-care. But even if it's 5 minutes a day, if we start with 5 minutes a day and make it a practice, that can be one really great tool to support ourselves. So I always like to take a break here to do that self-care plan and for you to be able to look back at that and use it moving forward. But what I want to spend a good majority of the time on today is really the tools and the resources of how we can support a friend who's struggling. So we've already talked about, what are those risk factors? What are warning signs? How can I tell when a friend is struggling? But then what do we do next? So what we're going to do is a short kind of quiz, but I always say it's not really a quiz because it's not graded. So don't get worried when you hear that word. You should be able to join it. It looks like most of us have. If you haven't, you can put your own name or you can stay anonymous, whatever feels more comfortable for you. So digging into the tools here, the first question I have for all of you is how can you show a friend you're listening? All right, absolutely. The majority of us, we're in that left-hand column here. We're going to put away distractions. So the very first thing that we do at Samaritans when someone is struggling or when someone calls us is we way back in grade school, and we have a lot of those listening skills already in place. But we want to make sure that we're really doing active listening. We're really making sure that we have put away distractions. Our friend has the whole floor. We also want to make sure that we have good body language. So even though I'm someone who sits with my arms crossed a lot, a comfortable way to sit, when I'm talking to my friend, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to have open body language. Because if I'm crossing my arms and my friend's telling me some pretty hard stuff that they're going through, they might be looking at me and thinking, is Kelsey over this conversation? Is she mad at me? Is she annoyed that I even brought it up? And really, the last thing I want is for someone who's processing a lot of heavy stuff to also have to worry what I'm thinking. So as much as possible, I'm going to use open body language. I'm going to angle towards the person, keep my hands at my side, and nod along so they know I'm listening. I also really don't want to change the topic. It can be easy to want to do this when we start talking about something that's maybe a little uncomfortable, that we're not quite sure how to handle. But if my friend came to me with their problem, they clearly needed the space to talk about that. So as much as possible, I want to let my friend lead the conversation and I follow and listen to them. So the next thing we do on top of those active listening skills is we're going to start validating our friend, maybe asking them some questions. So what I have on the screen here is 3 examples that are going to come up. And I want you to pick what the best one out of these 3 examples is to say to a friend who is struggling. So your choices are, I completely understand what you're going through. I know what you can do to fix this, or it sounds like things are so difficult right now. All right. So we're a little all over the board here. That's usually how it happens on this question. Don't worry, I want to talk a little bit more about them. So the most correct answer is the one on the right-hand side, the one that says, it sounds like things are so difficult right now. And really what I'm doing with that statement is I'm validating my friend. I'm letting them know that however they're feeling in this situation, it's okay. They really are going through a lot. On the left-hand side, the one that says, I completely understand what you're going through, I don't think this is terrible, but I do think that there's one big reason that I wouldn't use that statement. And that's because of the word completely. So if my friend tells me a situation, they say, I failed a test, and I respond with, I completely understand what you're going through. There's a pretty good chance that my friend is going to turn to me and say, but you don't completely understand what I'm going through. Even if I failed that test too, we maybe didn't get the same grade on it. We might not even have the same emotions about it. And honestly, chances are I don't completely understand what they're going through. So I think this is a pretty common phrase that people use. And when they're using that, I think they're trying to do that validating part. They're trying to empathize with their friend and let them know that it's normal with their feelings of what they're going through. But I would change it just a little bit. And I would say something like, that's understandable that you're stressed that you failed that test. So I'm normalizing that emotion. I'm telling them it's okay to feel that way, but I'm not suggesting I know everything because chances are I don't. The one in the middle there, the one that says, I know what you can do to fix this, that kind of leads us into advice giving, which leads us into our next question here. My next question for all of you is, what could be maybe negative about giving advice? So how could it make a situation worse? Why might it be something we want to avoid? So you have a little bit longer to answer this one because you'll have to type a bit. So you've got about a minute left. It looks like a lot of people have answered. All right, 40 more seconds. While we're kind of finishing up, while a few of you who still haven't answered are answering, I want to say that, at Samaritans, I don't think we think advice is 100% good or 100% bad. But I do think we kind of jump to giving advice too quickly. A lot of people jump to kind of fixing the problem before just letting our friend have that space, letting them have the time to talk about whatever they're going through. So on top of listening to our friend and validating them, we try to keep our advice to a minimum, right? We don't ask or we don't offer a lot of advice. So I'd love to hear, let's see what all of you answered. So, maybe you just don't want to tell your friend what to do. It might not help the situation. I could give advice that's good for me, but maybe it's not good for my friend. I give the wrong advice. Or maybe they just don't want advice. Absolutely. So I think we kind of get the idea of why maybe we wouldn't want to give advice. So what I always suggest for people, if you're supporting a friend and you have some really good advice, what I would do first is, honestly, I would sit on it way longer than I thought I should. I would hold my advice. I would just give my friend that space to talk about what they're going through. And before I gave them that advice, I would first ask them if they wanted it. So you could say something like, I have a few friends who went through a similar situation, and I know what helped them. I don't know if it'll help you, but do you want that advice? And then really what I did is I gave the power to my friend. If they want that advice, great, I'm happy to problem solve with them. But if they say, I don't really want that advice, I'm going to respect that. I'm going to keep it to myself. I'm just going to give them the space to vent, to talk about what they're going through. So I think it's going to give us oh, that'll be the next thing. So we have another question here. And thinking back to what we talked about in the beginning, so again, remember we talked about this way at the beginning. All right. Most of you have answered, but 5 seconds if you haven't. So again, absolutely yes. It looks like the majority of us kind of thought about that, went back to the beginning of our conversation. So if I'm supporting a friend, if I'm listening to them, if I'm avoiding my advice, there may be a point in the conversation where I start to get a little worried about them. Maybe they're saying things that make me nervous. Maybe I already noticed those warning signs that we talked about. Or like I said, maybe I just have a gut feeling. Like I think my friend is struggling. I think they need my support. If it ever comes to that point, what we really want you to do is ask your friend directly, are you having thoughts of suicide? And again, that's an okay question to ask, and it can be really helpful. So I want to talk about what we do with the answer we get for that. But before we even go down that road, I want to take just a moment for all of us to kind of think about how we would feel. So if you were supporting a friend, if you had to ask that question, if they said, yes, I'm having thoughts of suicide, how would you feel? I have 4 emotions on the screen here, and you can rank them kind of to, I'd be feeling this one the most, to be feeling this one the least. All right. So it looks like for the most part, a lot of people are saying I'd feel kind of scared, maybe a little uncomfortable. Absolutely. Even some of you said, I'd be feeling calm, which I always say I like to hear, right? Maybe you've done a presentation like this before, you've used these skills, you've had to support a friend before. It's always great to hear that. Sometimes people feel a little angry, a little frustrated. It can be really hard when we see someone we love say like that about themselves. We can get a little frustrated there. So every single one of these emotions and any of them that you're having in that situation is completely valid, right? It's a lot to support a friend, which is why we also do that self-care part. If you're the person who's supporting, if you're not having those thoughts of suicide, you also want to get some support for yourself because that's a lot to hang on to. But I want to talk a little bit about what we can do if our friend says yes or no to that question. Probably a little less nervous to get. So if my friend says, no, I'm not having thoughts of suicide, I usually just simply, thank them for sharing that with me and keep talking to them about what they're going through. Because even though they're not having thoughts of suicide, they still need my support. They still need my help. But what if my friend says yes? And I think understandably, that's the answer that most of us are probably a little more nervous, a little bit more unsure of what to do with. Or, what if my friend says, yeah, I'm having thoughts of suicide, but I'm telling you because you're my friend and you can't tell anyone else. So I bring up this scenario because I've heard it quite a few times during my time at Samaritans. And what I will say about that scenario is that every single time I've heard it, what happens is the friend who is having thoughts of suicide, sometimes they tell us initially they were mad at their friend. They're like, I just told you not to tell anyone. And then their friend broke their trust and got them connected to a trusted adult. But the person who is having thoughts of suicide, they also tell us that because their friend broke their trust, got them connected to an adult, they got connected to the resources they needed, they got the support they needed, they ended up getting healthier, happier, and they ended up looking back and were pretty grateful that their friend broke their trust. So I don't want to say that's an easy position to be in. If your friend says, yeah, but don't tell anyone, I imagine you're kind of torn in 2 directions, right? You don't want to break their trust, but also they just told you something that was really big. They told you something that was life and death. And I think what we want you to know at Samaritans is that's way too big of a secret to be keeping to yourself. So I'm an adult in the suicide prevention field, And if I was supporting someone who was having thoughts of suicide, I wouldn't be doing it alone. I would have a teammate with me, a colleague. And as a young person, you definitely shouldn't have to handle that alone either. So the most important thing, if someone says, yes, I'm having thoughts of suicide, is we want to reach out and find a trusted adult to support our friend and us. So I would love to hear some examples. What are some examples of trusted adults you could turn to if you were worried about yourself or a friend? All right. So already we have some answers that said our parents, lots of family, maybe teachers, counselors, coaches. Absolutely. We have a lot of good examples here. And, I did even notice that someone said, I don't really feel like I have any. That's one of the reasons we give you the helpline, right? That is staffed with trusted adults that are there to support you. You also have quite a few trusted adults here in the room who are there to support you as well. And sometimes people feel kind of bad. They say, I don't want to talk to my parents first. It's okay to go to a counselor first, to a teacher. The main point is we want you to be connected to an adult who has a better understanding of the resources to help your friend. So I have one last question for all of you. That question is, what should you do if a trusted adult doesn't help you or doesn't take the situation seriously? So if you reach out and you feel that for whatever reason, the adult didn't help or kind of even dismissed you, minimized the situation. All right, absolutely. We want to find another adult. So this doesn't happen very often, but adults aren't perfect, right? There may be a time where you reach out to an adult to support you or your friend, and for whatever reason, you feel like they don't take it seriously. And that can be incredibly frustrating. It probably took a lot of time and effort for you to kind of feel comfortable and safe to reach out to that adult. But as much as possible, what we want you to do is try to reach out to a second trusted adult, because chances are that next person, that next adult, will be there to support you or your friend. So I think it's going to kind of show us our leaderboard here, but it looks like we're all kind of neck and neck here. Lots of really good answers. And I want to thank you all for, participating, for having some really thoughtful responses there. So before I hand it back over to you all to do a quick survey, I want to take a moment to say thank you for being here today, for showing a lot of respect and maturity throughout this conversation. I know it's not easy. I want to open the floor for questions. And also, I want to just say that if you're ever feeling that way, if you're ever struggling, there are people who want to help you. As I said before, you have so many adults here in the room, here in your school, who want to support you. And our helpline is available 24/7. So you can call or text that number on the screen 24/7. Otherwise, as I said, I want to open it up. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask them now. And I'll just ask someone on the Blake side to tell me if there are any questions, because my Zoom has frozen for the chat box. All right, if there are no questions, I can pass it back over to you all to talk about the survey.
Fabulous. Kelsey, thank you so much. That was really wonderful. And I want to reiterate what Kelsey had said to all of you. Thank you all so much for being such a respectful audience. You guys did a great job. Again, we recognize this is hard, but you were a really, really wonderful group. So thank you so much again. Now, at this time, if you will check your emails, you should have gotten another email from Mrs. Worthley, not the one that brought you to this presentation, but there's a second one that has the survey in that email. All that is a very quick questionnaire that kind of gives us sort of a temperature check on how you're doing. At the end of that survey, you'll all see the opportunity to indicate that you want to have a follow-up conversation after this presentation. If you say yes, and you can talk about yourself, you can talk about a friend, you can talk about a family member, you can talk about a question that you had, or maybe just something that didn't quite make sense. If you indicate, yes, I would like to talk, then either myself, Mr. Marangi, or a guidance counselor will be speaking with you as soon as possible. What I'll say too, if you're not sure, if you think maybe this is something that you want to talk about, but you're not 100% certain, indicate yes, and we'll figure it out together. At this time as well, if you don't have any more questions, either for us as counselors or for Kelsey from Samaritans, you can log off the Zoom, but we will be here for the next little while to answer any additional questions that you have. Or if you would like to ask questions moving forward beyond today or not in a public forum like this, you can always reach out to us via email or come down the guidance and find us then. Thank you so much once again, and I hope you all have an excellent afternoon and a great rest of your day.